This happened maybe at least years ago. I was about a kid, maybe I was around 8 years old. This took place sometime around, I guess, the mid 2000s. I watched a lot of Cartoon Network a lot, and we did have neighbors, nice ones. There were some neighbors that were really mean, but I didn't really mind the area, as I was a kid at the time. Now, since I knew this one girl named Andrea. Now, I'm not going to give her last name for personal reasons, but her name was Andrea, and she and I were really good friends. We had the same interests, we played together at recess at school, and sometimes we would even hang out outside of school. Some days she would go to my house to hang out with me and my brother. Sometimes she would bring her younger sister. Her younger sister, at the time of this story, we'll call her Charlie. Charlie was maybe around my brother's age, maybe just a bit younger, though. At least by 1 year. Charlie and Andrea were really nice people, and they were really great friends. I hang out with them most of the time. However, there was this one incident that kind of happened at least many years ago. We didn't really know about this until years later. Now, Andrea and I were playing dolls, mainly Barbies, and we even played a few Littlest Pet Shop. I mainly played with the Littlest Pet Shop as I wasn't really into, Barbies, but Charlie was playing with the Barbies. It was one of those days when it was during the summer and we didn't have school or anything, so it was a great opportunity to hang out. Now, as I was playing with my Littlest Pet Shop, Charlie said that she heard something from the basement. Now, the parents were outside doing some yard work, so we were most likely in the house. Her mom was at work and their dad was doing some lawn work. He works at a ketchup factory, in case if you guys are wondering, and I don't remember what Andrea's mom did at the time. Now, we decided to go to the basement. As I went down there with Charlie and Andrea, we had a look around at the basement. Now, the basement had a set of stairs. Of course, it was not like any other basement, but it would look like a basement that could be used for a basement apartment. The difference is that there was no toilet, nothing that would be appliances working for a basement apartment. It looked as big as a basement apartment, but it wasn't a basement apartment. There were old boxes and even some stuff lying around, such as toys and even other stuff. However, though, Charlie and I, along with Andrea, were looking around the basement as we were trying to find something for Charlie to play with. But then at the corner of my eye, I noticed that there was two pair of eyes from the darkness of under the stairs. I had no idea what that was, so I turned on my light, but absolutely to see nobody there. Now that was really strange, as I didn't see anyone. At least a few minutes later, when I shut off the lights again, I see that those eyes were still there. I didn't even know what to think of this, but Andrea saw the eyes too, and she thinks that there's somebody living in the basement. Of course, she told her dad when we got out of there, and her dad had a look, but there was nobody there. He did a thorough sweep around the basement, checked in every corner and everywhere, in the dark too, and even at light, just to make sure that there was actually nobody there. But he came back out and said that there was no one living there. So we didn't even bother to question the mom, as the mom would probably have the same thing. Now, at this time, while I was with one of my friends who were neighbors, apparently we probably discovered someone or something in the basement. I don't even know what was in there, and I simply have no idea if it's still there to this day. But at least years later, I guess it was around maybe 10 years later, the conversation was brought up again when I ran into them at a park. Andrea said something that made my skin crawl. Apparently said that there was some paranormal activity at that place, and many people say that a girl had died in the basement, and she has been watching people inside the basement since, which that explains why we've been seeing the eyes at the dark. At the time when she told me this, they had moved away from that house. They do live in still on our street, but they never saw what became of that paranormal activity. There was not really much, just some things would be moved in the basement, but we have no idea if there was really an actual person there or it was paranormal. I don't normally believe in the paranormal, but after this experience, I really don't know what to think of it. So this happened to one of my friends at the time of this story, and her name at the time of the story was Martha. Now, Martha was about in college, and she had just recently graduated at the time. So, before she left my hometown back in 2018, Martha really was a really nice girl. She was very helpful, very kind, and she always was there to lend somebody a helping hand. However, though, this happened sometime in 2018 before she left. She was still living at her old house and was packed up and ready to move a few days later. So, she was there with her parents, and they were spending at least the last few weeks living in that house. So while they were in that house, they apparently do lots of stuff, such as going out to eat at times, even have parties, etc. However, Martha's parents were very strict, so at times, Martha would usually either take the bus to get out of the place after an argument, or the parents would leave, depending on what it is, or the situation-wise. Martha was at her house home alone one night, when one of their neighbors was new to the neighborhood. His name was Andy, and he walked up to the house and greeted her with some plate of cookies. Martha thanked him as he looked like he was new to the neighborhood, and he said he was and wanted to welcome her. Martha was very confused by Andy's actions, but didn't think much of it at the time. As the next few days went by, Andy had been watching Martha through his bedroom window, which was next door to hers. Every time Martha would look up and see Andy would always give her a creepy way and creepy smile. This honestly started to make Martha uncomfortable, so she did her best to ignore him and kept the blinds closed. She had been doing this for at least a few weeks, but before she moved was the day something had happened. One day she walked out and went to her car because she had to drive her friend to a hospital. But as she was doing this, however, Andy stared at her very awkwardly. Now, at the time before Martha pulled out of the driveway to leave, she told him in a very polite tone, can you please not stare at me like that? It's really creeping me out." Andy looked a little upset, walked back inside his house, didn't even think of anything in that matter. However, it was early in the morning the next day when something happened. Of course, Martha was basically packing up her things when all of a sudden she heard something from outside. She looked and saw that Andy was apparently in her backyard, but she wondered why Andy was in the backyard. And then she saw that Andy had a knife. It looked like a hunting knife as he used it to cut some wires, I think from the fence behind her. Now at the time, Martha alerted her parents and they called the police, and her dad ran outside to shout at Andy to tell him to get off the property. The police arrested Andy, and Andy had never tried to do anything to Martha. To this day, Martha still wondered why Andy had hopped over the fence and why he was at the backyard. This story still shivers her to this day, and she's glad that she's moved out after this incident, as she had no idea how long Andy would be there, and she wondered how long she could tolerate Andy. But she's never saw Andy again, and I really do hope, along with Martha, that Andy was still in prison. There's probably a place for him somewhere deep inside the prison where he would rot in hell. Back in the summer, I guess in 2013 or 2014 in the summer, this actually happened to me when I was about, maybe you could probably say in my early teen years. Now, I was off school for the summer, and it was sometime in July at the time of the story. There was a neighbor at my house, well, not far from my house, maybe about 5 minutes away, and her name was Bethany. Bethany was a really good friend of my mom's and even my dad, as well as me and my brother. She would always do lots of different things. Of course, she would take us to the park, the beach. Sometimes she would even take us out to eat. Most of the time though, she usually works and even has school. But with that being the case, Bethany was like a really good friend. However, one day I was staying over at her place with my brother. We brought along a bunch of movies as we wanted to watch the Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters movie. Of course, at the time, Bethany had this one closet in her bedroom, which I had no idea why I wasn't allowed to go in there. She always had it closed for a reason, and she said that no one was allowed to go in there. At first I thought maybe it was just personal stuff, but it got really weird from there. Now, one day, my mom, along with my dad, asked me if I wanted to stay over at Bethany's house that day. I said yes. Of course, when our parents dropped us off, we were all there, and Bethany welcomed me and my brother. However, my brother was on Bethany's laptop, watching videos and whatnot, when Bethany said she's gonna go out and get us some dinner. She said to us to stay home and be at her place. She told us to give certain rules, like don't look in the closet, the one that I mentioned earlier, don't go outside, etc. I nodded without a question, and Bethany said that she'd be back in a little while. So she left and told me to call her if anything were to happen. Now, as soon as she left, I ended up deciding to think that it's a good time to look through the closet that she had been hiding. Call me a hypocrite. I know it was wrong for myself to do it, but I had to find out what Bethany was hiding and wondered what could possibly be in the closet. I stared at that closet door for at least a little while, hesitating if I should really go there. I decided that was my better luck. I opened up carefully. She had a lock inside her bedroom, so I closed her bedroom door and locked it, just so then that way my brother doesn't hear. Since he was wearing headphones and was watching videos, he wouldn't be able to hear me snooping. I opened up the closet door, and I was shocked at what I saw. There were a lot of drugs that Bethany had been hiding inside. Most of them had injections, others for people to, well, snort and etc. I honestly had no idea why the hell she's having those drugs inside, and I even saw she had alcohol. Bethany was underage, and she apparently, at the time when she was drinking, I actually found out that she had her first drink when she was 18, and I looked to see a stash of cash at one safe, which somehow, for some reason, I know the code of the safe. Surprisingly, I did not even know how I found out. I was very fuming of what she was doing, and I found out that she's been selling drugs. At this time, I got really furious and decided against my better judgment that I go and confront Bethany about this. Since I was maybe in my teen years, I confronted Bethany when she showed up and asked me why the hell did I even go inside her closet. I told her exactly what she did, and I ended up calling the cops. Brave as I was, Bethany was arrested and she was thrown in jail for at least 25 to 30 years due to using drugs. My parents had came and picked me up as soon as the police arrived, but they're very glad that I stopped Bethany. I had no idea why Bethany had these drugs, but my dad said that she was a sketchy neighbor, especially when me and my brother saw her. Still to this day, I don't know if Bethany is still out there, but I really hope she's still in prison, because I really do hope she doesn't do drugs again. And still to this day, this is why I don't trust anyone anymore, besides my closest friends and family members. This is why I don't trust people when it comes to drugs and anything else for that matter. I still wonder what could have happened if I had not went into that closet. Chances are something could have been really bad at that point, and it would not end well if that were to be the case.